Hello, I'm Brandon,
And I'm Mom.
and welcome here to Tansson Talks TV.
Yeah, thank you for joining us again today.
Yes, I'm very excited for us to get into it. And Mom, how are you doing?
I am doing fine, Brandon. Thank you for asking. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I'm very excited for us to get into this. And Mom, what show are we speaking about today?
Today we're going to talk about One Day at a Time and the original series.
Yes, One Day at a Time is a television sitcom that began airing in December of 1975 on the CBS network. It ran for 9 seasons and 209 episodes. It was created by Whitney Blake and Alan Manning and developed by Norman Lear. The series was produced by Lear's production company, T.A.T. Communication Company, and this premiere episode started originally aired on December 16th of 1975 and was titled Anne's Decision.
That is great. That's a lot of good information, Brandon. All right. And I'll give just a little synopsis of just what the first episode was about for our audience. And please feel free, guys, go back and watch the first episode. But at the beginning, Anne comes home from work. Anne is a mother with two children, Julie and Barbara. Both are teenagers. And so when she comes in from work, Julie runs to her and asks the question if she could go on a camping trip with her friends. Anne, of course, listens to her, and then decides no, because she knows that on this particular camping trip, that there will be young men and young women together, and so she said no. Julie didn't really like this response, and so they kind of go back and forth about this, and Julie becomes upset. She threatens to leave the house, and she really does, in fact, does go and does leave. She says she's going to go be with her father. Anne is divorced from her husband very recently. And so she says she's going to go to be with her father. In the midst of all this, Anne's boyfriend comes over, and then the superintendent of the building comes over also to visit. Um, Julie does come back, and Anne decides again after she has listened to she's listened to what the people have told her, meaning Schneider, who is the superintendent of the building, along with her boyfriend, and she has spoken to Julie's father also. And Anne initially says no again, but then she says yes, that she was going to let her go. Julie at the end decides not to go, and she calls her friend, who she'd been speaking to earlier, and she just says that her mom decided that she was not able to go. Um, Even though Anne did give the blessing for her daughter to go, Julie decided to not go on this particular trip with her friends. And that, in essence, is the episode in a nutshell.
Well, thank you so much, Mom, for the synopsis.
You are welcome, Brandon.
Yeah, and I'll let you go straight into your top 10 list for this episode.
All right. Like the synopsis that I gave, of course, is just very basic. And when I did my top 10 today, I kind of did like I normally do for my premieres. I look for the top 10 things that you kind of learn and that will kind of help you guide within the series itself. And so these are the things that we kind of learn in the premiere episode of One Day at a Time. We learn that Anne is a single divorced woman. She's raising her two daughters, like I mentioned, and that will be Julie, who we think is 16ish, and then Barbara, who is we learned that Anne got married at 17, and she was married for 17 years. We understand that she is dating her divorce lawyer, and her divorce lawyer is named David, and David is one of the main characters. Also, um, we learn that Anne is 34 years old, but we also learn that David is 26 years old, and so basically she's dating a younger gentleman. And then we learn that Dwayne Snyder is the building superintendent, and that he pops in and walks in on a regular basis. He seems to have a key and just kind of pops on in. And he does it without getting permission or having an invitation. Let's see. We know that this particular show takes place in Indianapolis. We know that Julie likes to challenge her mother. Um, we know that we've learned that Anne took back her maiden name when she divorced. And we learned that for the children, Barbara seems to be more laid back. She's given the perception she's an athletic person. And then we learned that Anne admits to struggling to figuring out how to do it all as a single mom.
Well, thank you so much for your top 10.
Yes, sir.
And as we learn in many premiere episodes, we get a lot of hints as to what the series will be about. And this episode, Anne's decision for One Day at a Time, is no different. And so, this episode takes place not that long after Anne, the matriarch of the family, completes her divorce and moved to Indianapolis. And so, in this, we're able to learn about the characters, through the sort of conflict that happens with Anne. And overall, we get to see a bit of Anne's character, who she is and who she strives to be. And sometimes those can be two different things. And overall, for this episode, though, we're able to see that the series will be based on Anne being a single mother and trying to balance it all in a life that might not always be exactly what she was looking for, but she knows that she is right where she needs to be.
That's true.
Yeah, and so, Mom, going into our discussion portion, of this episode of One Day at a Time, overall, what was your thought about this episode?
Well, Brandon, I've seen One Day at a Time. I did watch it, oh gosh, it may have been 7, 8, 9 years ago when it started re airing again. And so I did watch, for the most part, almost all the way through the series. And I think you watched some episodes with me. Um, so yeah, so I thought the first episode, after watching it now in retrospect, and I did watch it twice, that it led the groundwork for things that I think is important for you to know as you do watch the series. It's important to know that Anne is divorced. I think you have to remember that this show did take place in the 70s. And so so some of the things that she talks about taking her name back, or as she said that she took her name back, that those are things that were important at that time period, or actually it was new. And some of the things that you talked about, I think, with Norman Lear, with who was one of the creators. Is that correct, Brandon?
Yes, he's the one that developed the show.
Okay, and that's is one of the things that he kind of did some challenging or new things at that time period.
Yeah, and to add on to it too, as I briefly mentioned in my introduction to this series, you know, the concept of the series was originally created by Whitney Blake and Alan Mannings, and so both of them were former actors turned writers, and the series was actually based somewhat on Whitney Blake's life for herself as a single mother at the time who had just gone through a divorce, and so as a little bit of a background to that as well is that they were a husband wife writing team, but even though they primarily created the concept in this first episode, though, yeah, it's interesting to see that it is at least somewhat inspired based off of her Whitney Blake's actual life, and so it's great to see what they were able to put into this first episode, a concept that Norman Lear was able to make into this series that we see today.
Yep, it's true. And like I said, I think, like I said, for consistency purposes, the series itself did a good job of kind of developing Anne as a person, and watch her grow as a single mother, but as career wise per se is what I'm going with. We got a chance to kind of watch her grow, in her career. We got a chance to watch her grow as a person itself, and then we got a chance to see how her children kind of, because how her children came out, because the series was on for many, many years, where we got to see both daughters at some point in time get married. And so it was a nice progression with the series.
Yeah, it definitely is, and yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, seeing how the show was able to break a lot of barriers, as is common with with shows developed by or created by Norman Lear. And so, speaking of that a little bit more too, I know that while we have mentioned him here and there throughout our Tansson Talks TV series, this is the first one that we have spoken about that he has directly created.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and so for a little background for those who don't know, Norman Lear created numerous different shows within primarily the 1970s, and yeah, and so this is definitely one of those series. But even though he wasn't directly producing a lot of shows by the 1980s, he did his production company actually produced a few different shows that we have previously spoken about. Those include the series Who's the Boss, Silver Spoons, and I believe, oh, and then also, of course, The Facts of Life. And we briefly spoke about Different Strokes as well.
Yep. Yeah. I guess you can tell what kind of series that we watch on a regular basis, can't you, Brandon?
Yes. And so these series oftentimes dealt with real issues that were pertaining for the time, but he always tried to do his best to make them both as realistic as possible, but also with humor for you to laugh about it. I mean, we definitely yeah, are turning on the TV for for laughter and family viewing, and so yeah, it kind of helped lead to some of the series that we have in the present day.
Yes. Very true. Very true. And just so the audience, and I just want to bring it up just a little bit, that we talked about this when we started off. I talked about One Day at a Time. There was another series called One Day at a Time that came out in the how many years ago, Bryn? Maybe.
Yeah, so that series came out 2017 to 2020 and lasted 4 seasons and 46 episodes.
Yep. Yep. So for anyone who was wondering about the confusion when I kind of said that there were two One Day at a Time series.
Yes, the new series is a reimagining of the series from a different lens, and Norman Lear also was a executive producer of that as well through one of his other production companies, Act Free Production. Yeah, and so I know we spoke about you having seen a majority of the original series, and yeah, I've seen a bit of episodes here and there throughout the years of the original series, and I've seen practically all of the most recent series as well.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think we sat down together and watched the newer series.
Yeah, and so yeah, and overall, I actually did want to go back to one of the points that you were mentioning too about the character of David. And so I know you mentioned that the relationship between Anne and David, and so I found it interesting that you actually mentioned that they were dating because I actually didn't get that perception from the first episode.
Oh, you didn't? I don't know, and maybe it's because I've seen them all, um, and I knew that they were dating. But yeah, and they've made a reference to being the divorce lawyer, which in the Golden Girls they've made the same type of reference also, and so I just kind of got the perception that they were dating.
Yeah, and at least from me just seeing this first episode, because most of the episodes I saw were from some of the later seasons.
Hmm.
But I don't know. From this episode, I kind of got a they have some sort of interest in each other, but at the same time that like almost as a mutual understanding that it's not really going anywhere, but we're just going to keep doing this sort of thing anyway.
Yeah. I can see how you can say that, and like I said, it probably is just because I am familiar and know that they almost married at some point, so that's how I knew they were dating at the time.
Yeah, and I do know one of the lines they mentioned too is that he constantly, proposes to her, and she's constantly not interested. In part because of the age thing, but that's not the only thing. But yet, to her, one of the main things.
Yes, yep, very true. And then, can we talk a little bit about Schneider, Brandon? Schneider, I thought was an interesting character. Um, well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, they mentioned that he has a wife, and I cannot recall if he was married on the series or not. But somehow I don't think he was married on the series. Please correct me if I'm wrong down at the bottom, guys, in the comments. But regardless of whether or not he's married or not, he is. He comes to see Anne on a regular basis and just kind of almost is harassing, at least in the first episode. And so it kind of makes you wonder about Schneider himself as a person. He kind of just enters in the building without asking permission. He kind of provides whatever advice he has, but he's kind of odd about it. Now, later in the series, I will say that Snyder is developed as a good person. It's just that for the first episode, he just strikes you as being kind of odd. And then if he was married, why is he there bothering Anne on a regular basis?
Yeah, and me even going for this episode and through the couple times that we watched it, I had to deeply think about like who exactly is Schneider in this episode because well, first of all, having seen, let's said, more of him in the later seasons, yeah, he's a character I definitely really enjoy, but in this episode, I can't really put my finger on what I truly think yeah, he's doing in this episode because in some sense it seems like he's somewhat hitting on Anne, but yet it doesn't sound like he actually cares for her like that at the same time, more so that he just kind of wants to show off his power and his brand new master key he has to all of the all of the different apartment buildings, but yet in the same regard, there's numerous different apartment buildings. Why specifically Anne? Is it because she's divorced, or is he actually attracted to her? That's kind of left unanswered, and I don't know if we really get any resolution to that. But yeah, I thought that was just kind of strange.
Yeah, not in this episode. And like I said, in future episodes, of course, he's kind of fleshed out as a person and as a character, and he's very likable. It was just this one episode; it just seemed kind of odd, and maybe I need to watch episode number two again. But in this first episode, it was just kind of an odd character.
Yeah, and so I don't know when they ultimately decided to change his character, but I'm just glad that they did, and I'm curious to see how long it took them to really make that shift.
Yes, yes. And I know we didn't talk about Barbara, but I don't think her, and this particular episode, and Barbara would be Anne's daughter, the youngest one. And in this particular episode, she really didn't have much of a character, more of a much of a storyline, really. In this particular episode, she was just there to show that she was just the younger daughter, and and that she was in well, I think high school, and she was on a basketball team, and to just kind of, and they really didn't develop, of course, her relationship with her sister at that time. She just seemed kind of laid back, whereas Julie seemed very intense.
Yeah, and so that is such an interesting dynamic for her. And going back a little bit, though, actually, before I do that, I did want to allow for you a moment to speak out the theme song. We know One Day at a Time has a very iconic theme song, and Mom, what are your thoughts about it?
I love it. There are words, there's pictures, and so for me, and it's catchy. So the theme song, I really do love the theme song. So I kind of gave the theme song an eight. I think it's very appropriate for the show. Throughout the years that it was on, they kept the same theme song and they let the longer version always play. So I really like the theme song.
Yes, I definitely enjoy the theme song as well. I definitely think it's a very memorable one, and yeah, but going back a bit though, so of course for this series right here, and well, this episode, it's called Anne's Decision, and so one of the reasons that it's called this, as the episode alludes to, is that as Anne says about three fourths through the episode, is that for the first 17 years of her life, her dad made all of the decisions in her life. And then for the next 17 years, it was her husband. And now, she finally had a chance to make a decision of her own. And in her words, she blew it because her daughter left to try to go back to her ex husband.
Yes, and I thought that was very important that they actually named this episode Anne's Decision, because it showed that I think they did a good job of showing the dynamics of, because she was really young when she got married, and how she said that she really didn't make decisions as a young person, and then even as a married person, and this is her first real decision that she's making on her own for her child, and then she kind of goes against, which is interesting, what she probably wanted to say. And I think she said that at some point, that she was willing to trust her child. And so she kind of went against everything she probably thought she should have done in order to allow her child to kind of have this experience of camping with these group of friends. And it's interesting to watch that, how Anne's decision. Julie did kind of go with what her mother originally thought. And so I guess just decisions itself and just kind of watching to see how Anne was able to kind of make this decision on her own. I think that was important for this particular episode to show that she's growing as a person.
Yeah, and what was interesting though is, yeah, she had sort of David explain to her, like, why is all of this happening, and it wasn't so much that they yeah, that he disagreed with her decision, but rather that you didn't give her a voice. And
Mm.
even if, for all intents and purposes, that you're going to say no, it's like, yeah, they mentioned that one of the reasons that she was so fed up with her, I guess with her childhood and her marriage was that she wasn't given any options. She was just told what to do and had to be content with it. Is that she didn't at least hear out her daughter before saying no, and so that I think is what ultimately led her to change her mind in the sense that she doesn't want to lose her daughter like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which at the very least she was able to prevent that for at least this season.
Yeah, at least for this episode anyway.
But yeah, and actually, before we begin wrapping up our discussion, so of course we mentioned that this is the premiere episode for the series, and interestingly enough, aired in December of 1975, which most shows at this point would have held off until January, but it kept airing. December 16th, 23rd, 30th, with just keep on going. So I don't know if TV networks were a little different in terms of the holiday season back in 1975.
Yep. Well, Brandon, I don't remember back that far, so yeah, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, but what was interesting was that this was not the original, pilot episode, and so the original had a little different dynamic. And so, from reading up about it, of what you could find about that original pilot, is the show was originally going to be called "Free to Get Ready," and Anne was going to be a nurse instead of her current job, and that she only would have had one daughter.
Oh wow. So who's the third person to get ready?
That's what I was wondering. That I don't know.
Wow. Wow.
But as a whole, I mean, looking back at this, what would you say about the series One Day at a Time, the original one as a whole?
What did I say about the episode as a whole? I thought the episode was really great. So I thought it laid the groundwork. It was a quick watch, or at least it seemed like a quick watch. I thought they had a lot of material in here for someone. Like I said, I had to watch it twice. So there was a lot of material in here to really kind of develop within the 25-ish minutes that it was on. So I thought they did a nice job with it.
But yeah, so I definitely think that like I said, the series did a really good job. One of the earliest portrayals of a divorced mom on broadcast television, and yeah, and I mean a really great show from the legendary Norman Lear, and yeah, I mean I really enjoyed this series, and something I want to mention too, before I get into that last point, is that it was, of course, like many of his shows, filmed in front of a live studio audience, and you could actually hear some of the studio audience in the episode. Like I remember a notable oh, right before the climax of the episode.
Yeah, I know you have to remind that back to me so I could hear that. So that was an interesting. It was interesting to hear that.
As a little bit of a tidbit, though, is like I said, while the series was going on, this was just one of several of Lear's shows that were airing at the same time on the CBS network, and so it's just remarkable to even, I mean, see the impact he was able to have on TV, and then the 2017 version reimagining of the series was one of the last shows he produced before he passed away back in 2023 at the age of 101.
Yes, yes, amazing. And like I said, his kind of at times forward thinking was kind of it was really impressive.
And would you say that this series holds up today?
Would it hold up today? Yes, with so a little bit of modernization, I think it would hold up today.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Mom, for this great discussion. I always enjoy speaking with you.
Oh yeah, I enjoy speaking with you too, Brandon. And for anyone who's watching, like I said, let us know what's the next series you want us to look at, and let us know if you agree, if you pulled anything else out of this particular episode. Please put it in the comments.
Yeah, and until next time, we will see you next time.
All right, have a great day, Brandon.
Bye.
Bye bye.